Hi, how you doing? This is the Gamertron, and welcome back to the Gamertron Show. There are too many damn multiplayer video games. You know what I'm talking about? There's too many good games. There's too many good PvE, PvP games. There's too many games to pick from. Each one vying for your time. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but it's creating an almost unsolvable problem. And that's the multiplayer communities, the multiplayer player bases. When we have so many multiplayer games out on the market, vying for your playtime, it really does splinter communities and player bases, and there's unfortunately almost, and I'll get into this later, there's almost nothing we can do about it. Everyone has the right to play what they want to play when they want to play it. Unfortunately, with multiplayer games, without bots, which is why I advocate and demand bots in my multiplayer video games so that I can play them whenever I want. The problem with multiplayer video games without bots is that without a strong, healthy player base, some content becomes inaccessible. Certain game modes and playlists, if there aren't enough people playing, actual content of the game will be unplayable. And usually the remainder of any player base will stick to what is the most popular game mode, and usually that's almost always Team Deathmatch. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. You've all experienced this before with a multiplayer game that you loved, a game that you played religiously, that you adored, that you came back to day and night, and then one day you couldn't play certain game modes in the multiplayer anymore. Matchmaking became absurdly long, and you maybe just would not get into a match of domination or capture the flag because there was no one playing those game modes. This has happened with the original Titanfall, with Titanfall 1. A huge portion of the content in Titanfall 1 is basically unplayable, because there's no one playing most of the game modes. The only two game modes that are populated are Frontier Defense, the PvE co-op survival, and Attrition, which is Titanfall's version of Deathmatch. And that's a shame. I love Titanfall. I love Titanfall to death, but the player population is so low that game modes I want to play, I can't play. Wouldn't be an issue if it had bots. And it wouldn't be an issue if it had so much competition. The same thing is currently happening to my favorite video game of all time, Doom. Doom's multiplayer. I cannot get into any of the other playlists, any of the other game modes. It's strictly Deathmatch and Team Deathmatch people are playing. Which sucks, because I really like Soul Harvest and Warpath. And Freeze Tag! Freeze Tag was so much fun! But there simply aren't enough people playing the game modes, and there aren't bots in Doom multiplayer. And I'm sure this is triggering multiplayer PTSD loneliness from some of you. Remembering your favorite multiplayer games that you can't play anymore, or multiplayer games that just didn't survive, having a long lifespan. Because one, they didn't have bots. Multiplayer video games should always have bots, period. But also because there's simply so many multiplayer games to play. And I feel bad. I sometimes feel bad. I should never feel bad playing video games, but I cannot deny that sometimes I feel bad if I'm playing one multiplayer video game over the other. Because my participation, me playing that multiplayer video game, is actually supporting it. It's helping it. It's giving other people that want to play that multiplayer game people to play with. And unfortunately, the gaming community and the gaming YouTuber community, which this genuinely pisses me off. The YouTube gaming community is now incredibly quick to jump on the "it's dead" bandwagon. You get these YouTuber and these in the comment section calling a multiplayer game you like dead just because they don't like it or because it doesn't have millions of people playing it. I don't understand this mindset where you need to have millions of people playing your multiplayer game every day for it to not be dead. It only has a few thousand people, it's dead. Pardon my language, but that mindset is just really retarded. If it has only a few dozen people playing it, then maybe we could consider it dead. But a few thousand? Are you nuts? But yeah, I actually genuinely feel bad, and I feel sometimes forced to play certain multiplayer video games because I want to support the game. I want to support the multiplayer community for that video game. And it's unfortunate that I have to spread my attention, spread my time towards video games because I feel obligated to support them. Wouldn't be a problem if all of these games had bots. Anyways, but yeah, even though it's awesome, it's absolutely awesome that we have all these choices, all this option, and that multiplayer has exploded, and in doing so, it's created innovation, it's created competition within video game companies to try and make the best multiplayer game, the most addicting multiplayer game, the most fun multiplayer video game, and that only benefits gamers, with developers trying to do their best to make a multiplayer game that grabs your attention, that's fun to play, that's addicting, something that's worth your time. That's good for us. Bad for us is that these games live and die on a whim, unless they have bots. But yeah, when you have so many multiplayer games coming out, competing with one another, it really does hurt the other games' player bases. Everyone has only so much money and so much time, so people have to end up making choices. What multiplayer game do I want to play now in the highest point, in that game's prime of its multiplayer life cycle? And sometimes gamers miss out on playing a multiplayer that may have loved. I know I regret not putting more time into Battlefield Bad Company 2's multiplayer. I never hit max rank, I never unlocked all the weapons, or the attachments, or any of that jazz. And since the game doesn't have bots, all multiplayer games should have bots, damn it. Battlefield Bad Company 2 multiplayer on PC, at least for me. Some people have reported and told me that there's private community servers, but again, when I log into the game, I see absolutely no servers. It's dead in the water for me. All I have is Battlefield Bad Company 2 single player campaign at the moment, which is a shame, and I love Battlefield Bad Company 2 single player, but I have fond memories of playing the multiplayer, and I wish I could go back to that and play it anytime I wanted. But it's dead now, because there were other games I wanted to play at the time in terms of multiplayer and single player. And that's the absolute beauty, and that's the appeal of single player games, that they don't rely on a player base, that you can play them anytime. You don't need to get them when they just come out, when they're in their prime, when they've just been released, when everyone's buying and talking about them. You can buy a single player game whenever you want, because it doesn't rely on other people. It doesn't rely on a player base for the content to be playable, which is what I try to explain to multiplayer only gamers who only play multiplayer games. They don't play single player games. This is why I try to tell them. You demanding and buying and only playing multiplayer games gives developers and publishers the mindset that they don't have to worry about historical preservation of video games. You can't historically preserve a multiplayer game because it lives and dies on a player base. Without players, game's unplayable. You can't experience the content. Single player game will last the test of time, can be played a century from now. Super Mario Bros., single player only game. That game is how many years old? Can still be played. Original Unreal Tournament can still be played today, and that's a multiplayer only game. But you know why that game can still be played today? You know why that game's content can still be experienced to this day? Bots. Can't say the same about Battlefield Bad Company 2 multiplayer, unfortunately. And here's the thing, now we're getting multiplayer game after multiplayer game, some with bots, some without, and those with bots are going to stand the test of time, and they're going to be the games that you can pick up and play whenever. It doesn't matter if the game's in its prime in terms of its multiplayer player base. And all new multiplayer video games coming out nowadays have the issue where they just have too much competition. There's simply too much competition. There's too many multiplayer video games dividing multiplayer communities because people want to play different things at different times. And unfortunately, the YouTuber gaming community has developed this mindset where if the game doesn't have more than 1 million players online, then it's dead, which just encourages gamers that really like a certain video game to keep playing that multiplayer game and not support another multiplayer game that may really need it. It's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. Multiplayer games, multiplayer communities, multiplayer player bases nowadays. Granted, however, for some gamers, this is heaven for them. This is an absolute good, best thing ever for them because they have so many options and they can just jump from one multiplayer game to the next. And while good for you if you're happy to just keep moving on from one multiplayer game for the next, I'm the kind of gamer that likes to play any and all video games when I want, which is why I'm an advocate and demander of single player and bots. And while admittedly, it is for somewhat selfish reasons, it's not entirely. I also want games to have single player and bots for historical preservation so that all gamers, anyone of any age at any time, can play these games, all games, whenever they want to. And also for the sake of developers, I hate it so much to see developers working so hard to make their game, to make the maps, the weapons, the gameplay mechanics, the modes. I hate to see all that effort, that time, blood, sweat, and tears just go to waste. Go to waste because the content's unplayable. Because without players, there's no way to experience the content. If you have single player, if you have bots, that content is forever preserved and anyone can play it at any time whenever they want to. Which is why I'm going to keep demanding, hell, I'm going to keep pleading to my favorite video game developers who make my favorite video games to get working on implementing bots into their games. Not simply for historical preservation, but simply because there's too much competition. There's too much competition to guarantee a healthy multiplayer player base. So Titanfall 2, come on, let's add some bots. Doom! Doom! You had bots in your pre-alpha. Where'd they go? Let's get them back in. Rainbow Six Siege. Come on, Ubisoft. I know you know how to work that AI. Let's get some actual bot matches, please. I mean, everyone, just look at Battleborn and Evolve. The multiplayer for both those games is basically dead. There's simply too much competition, and people wanted to play other multiplayer video games at the time. But unlike other multiplayer video games, both Battleborn and Evolve have bots, so even though the multiplayer communities are dead, I can still experience all the content in Battleborn and all of the content in Evolve. While there is no real absolute solution to fix the problem of having simply too many multiplayer games to play and competing with one another, splintering each other's player bases because there's so many multiplayer games, not truly really, but if you add single player, if you add bots, then at least your game now has everlasting value and can be still picked up and played in the future. And that's all I gotta say for this video. If you guys liked the video in any way, shape, or form, please be sure to hit the like button. Hitting the like button helps you, helps me, helps everybody involved with the video. If you hit the like button, please leave a comment. What are your thoughts, feelings, and opinions on the topic of this video? Let me know your thoughts, feelings, and opinions in the comment section below. I love reading comments. Get nearly enough comments. Please leave a comment. If you want to help out and support this video, then please share it on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to help out and support me directly, then please consider pledging and becoming a patron on my Patreon. Anyways, guys, that's been a video, and I'll see you all later.